Hey there and welcome to this Golf.com special. I'm Ryan Aselta. Earlier today, the USGA and R&A released its 2017 distance report. Now, the 24-page report, which examines driving distance on the major professional golf tours, revealed a 3-yard average distance gain. Now, the report will likely fuel an already heated debate on distance in the game of golf. Let's welcome in Golf.com's Jeff Ritter and Dylan DeChair as we discuss the report's findings and break down what it all means. And guys, let's start with the key point. 3 yards increased level across the board seems to be the most concerning for the governing bodies. Jeff, what's your reaction to hearing those numbers and seeing some of the numbers in the report?
Reaction to the 3-yard gain, not surprised. I mean, I think anybody who follows the professional game of golf, even casually, a casual, unscientific eyeball test, I think we can all see that guys are stronger, they're in better shape, they're getting fit for clubs, and you can just see it tour week to week that they're hitting drives farther than we've ever seen before on tour. So my reaction was not one of surprise at all. I would have been surprised if the distance was flat or if somehow they had showed a decline.
Some of these numbers are kind of interesting here. 2.5-yard increase on the PGA Tour in 1 year. That number doesn't jump out too much at me. We're talking about this, guys, and that's the number we're talking about. The Web.com tour, though, is very interesting, Dylan. And, you spent time on the developmental tour. 10 yards increase in the last 15 years on the Web tour. The Web saw the biggest bump. I believe it was 6.9-yard average gain. And the average is now over 300 yards on the Web.com tour. Can you put your finger on why that is on that specific tour?
Yeah, it's a mix of factors, I think. One thing you do see is that when guys go from the Web to the PGA Tour, they actually hit it a little bit shorter when they get to the Tour. So some of this is course setup. The Web courses tend to be, bomb and gouge in some places. They play a couple weeks at higher elevation, like we saw the PGA Tour this week. So I think that plays a little bit of a factor. But I think one thing that could be interesting is if we're seeing these younger guys coming out of college, bigger, stronger guys who are also just more aggressive. They've seen the way Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, Tiger Woods, the way they go after the golf ball. If that's just the new model is, hit it as hard as you can, that's got to be playing a factor also.
Now, of course, guys, at the center of the distance debate has been the executive director and CEO of the USGA, Mike Davis. I recently sat down with Davis to discuss the distance debate and the concerns facing golf's governing bodies as they pertain to distance.
The effects on distance over the last even century has not been good for the golf course. And I did use the word horrible. Listen, I like to hit the ball a long way. But I think as we look forward, we're not just focused on the elite player of how far is a Dustin Johnson hitting it or a Rory McIlroy. What we're really focused in is, it gets back to the golf course. I think we're just concerned about how it's not just the elite game, it's how it's affecting the cost and the long-term sustainability of our game.
And Jeff, there it is, that word sustainability. Mike Davis uses it quite a lot in talking about distance. How much of an issue in your eyes is sustainability of golf courses versus the boom in distance and technology?
It's tricky because in this debate, they're sort of on opposite sides. If you want a golf course that's easy to maintain, you would ideally want less land. If you have a golf course that takes up less land, that's shorter holes, and that's a golf course that can get overpowered now easier than ever. If you're the sport as a whole, we want more people playing this game. Hitting the ball far is fun. That would make me, that draws people to the game to watch it on the weekends, watch the PGA Tour, and it draws people, or motivates people to put a club in their hands and go try it. So you can feel the opposite forces at work in this debate as we go through it.
There's a lot of factors, as you talked about, Jeff. We talked about technology, obviously, driver technology, golf balls, the fitness angle. These guys look different than they do back in the day. Jack Nicklaus does not look like a Gary Woodland or a Brooks Koepka or Dustin Johnson. There's also the technology and coaching that you guys have seen. Dylan, as someone who's played the game at a high level, how much of that is a factor? Things like TrackMan, things like elite coaches, helping players with their swing to reach the highest potential in their golf game.
I think you're right. The changes that players can make, it's so much more efficient a process rather than a coach watching you and trying to intuit something from seeing a bunch of swings. It just really takes a few swings, check the TrackMan, check the numbers, and then you can make that adjustment much more quickly. So I think that stuff definitely plays a role. Does the ball play a role? For sure, it also does. But the biggest change was probably more like 15 years ago rather than this incremental year-over-year new ball technology.
Now, the report talks of the many stakeholders that are going to be involved in coming up with some type of conclusion from this report. Well, a couple of those stakeholders responded on Monday morning. The PGA Tour and the PGA of America responded to the distance report. An email from PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan to tour members was obtained by multiple outlets. In that email, Monahan said, having carefully reviewed the data, we do not believe the trends indicate a significant or abnormal increase in distance since 2003 or from 2016 to 2017. Now, the CEO of the PGA of America, Pete Bavacqua, also responded with a statement saying, based on the info we have seen, we are highly skeptical that rolling back the golf ball in whole or part will be in the best interest of the sport and our collective efforts to grow the game. Interesting, Jeff. We're kind of seeing a division here. The USGA and the R&A have been heading in the direction you'd think of bifurcation or rolling back the ball. The Tour, PGA of America, they look like they're going a different direction.
And you can see it. I mean, they're stakeholders in this. So if you're the PGA Tour and you want, what do you want more than anything? You want eyeballs on your product on the weekend. You want people excited to watch golf. What would make you more excited to tune in on Sunday? Dustin Johnson hitting the ball 350 or Dustin Johnson hitting the ball 260? It's pretty, I mean, and then it obviously would just step down from there with other players. So I think the PGA Tour probably can see how this could negatively affect their product.
Interesting, Dylan. We hadn't heard much about the Tour's stance on this until Monday morning. Are you surprised that it was really a pretty strong stance against any type of rollback or bifurcation?
Yeah, I was a little surprised just with the language, and they came out, fairly aggressively on one side. But it makes sense. I mean, just the whole idea of regressing doesn't really sit that well with a fan of the game, I don't think.
Now, the report does not call for direct movement towards bifurcation or a rollback, though some of the legends have clearly called for that. Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus most recently. Jeff, after hearing the different sides of this argument, is a rollback, is bifurcation necessary from your perspective as a golf fan, as a recreational golfer?
I wouldn't use the word necessary, but I think I could see it on the table. When I look at the comments made by Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and the concern about classic golf courses becoming obsolete, I think, and I'm reading between the lines when I say this, I think what's really at the forefront of their minds is Augusta National, and seeing the changes that have been made to one of the most, if not the most iconic golf course in our game today. And I wonder if perhaps the Masters, if we wanted to bifurcate, if the Masters wanted to just put out their own golf ball, that's the one tournament, I think, out of the majors that could do it.
Dylan, there's ideas, so many of them floating out there. Are there other changes away from bifurcation or rolling back the ball that can be done here?
Definitely, there's other things you can do. I think you can look at the way you set up the golf course. The fairways really run out, and I like that. I do, and I think fans in general like that. It's fun to see the ball land and run out, but that doesn't necessarily happen on the golf courses that we're playing on the weekends, especially in the Northeast in the spring. Your drive lands and it sticks. You don't see that very often on tour. And the weeks that it is, softer or there's been a lot of rain, you do see guys hitting more mid irons, long irons into holes. So certainly that extra roll that's happening on tour, I would love to see the numbers just purely on carry distance and see how those have changed and how they compare to the total distance of drivers.
It is interesting, Jeff, because I've seen stats recently showing that golf courses at the tour level are cutting their fairways with greens mowers. I mean, it is not a green, it is a fairway, and I know my fairways at my home course, they get a little bit fuzzy and the ball's not rolling like Dylan alluded to. Is that a possible solution? And when we're talking about 2.5 yards, could that be the difference maker?
That's certainly an item on the table as we look into the mix of factors on how this whole debate, how we've gotten here with this these boosts in distance over the time. There's no question agronomy plays a role. It's hard to put a number on it. Is it 10% of the problem is because of the course conditioning that greens mowers now are used to mow fairways? Is it 15% of the problem? I don't know, but it's certainly, that would be one area. If we wanted to take a broader look at the game, we could look at how we set up the golf course. How do we mow them? What's the rough look like? What is the standard for fairway grass length or grain length? There's just different ways you could play around with that. So certainly, you don't hear that one discussed as much, obviously, as the golf ball these days, but it's fair to say that that's a factor.
Yeah, a lot of factors, a lot to digest, a lot to talk about, as we've shown. Right now, there's no timetable for a conclusion to this, though the report has called for more examination and monitoring of the distance issue, and that is to be done with the stakeholders in the game. Dylan DeChair, Jeff Ritter, thanks for being with us, and thanks for joining us on this Golf.com special. We'll see you next time right here on Golf.com.